What's good, YouTube? It's your boy Terxsu, but y'all can just call me Sunny for real. Alright, so look, this is awkward. I'm not gonna lie. I know it's been a month. Let me just say it like that. It's been a month. And again, I'm sorry. All right, I don't know. I just feel like when I upload a video, time just wants to move way faster. I don't know. In all honesty, school has been kicking my behind, but that's no excuse. I'm sorry. I truly am. Alright, let's see if I still know how to do this. Season 2 of Telltale's The Walking Dead is arguably one of the most memorable seasons in the whole franchise. Let me know if y'all want a video on that. But there's one thing about that season that never sat right with me. One thing that kept it from being straight up legendary. For the most part, I know people have their nitpicks with the season, you know, Clementine doing all the work. But the one thing that I feel that kept it from being close to legendary, I will say, is the vendetta they chose to end the season with. Kenny versus Jane. Let's be honest, for something that had such a dramatic buildup, it ends up being the weakest part of an otherwise decent season. And when you really examine the characters and the buildup, you start to realize something. This finale didn't need to be Kenny versus Jane. Before I even begin, let me say this now. I've already made a whole video about Jane. I'm not about to rerun that entire rant, but I do need to talk about her for a second because her part in this finale is exactly why Kenny versus Luke would have made so much more sense. So let's get into it. Season 2 spends all of this time building up suspense between the cast, people arguing, which led to trust issues, and relationships falling apart in a zombie apocalypse. When we, as players, get to episode 5, the game sends us this message. Here's Jane. She's more important now. It's almost as if they expect us to act like she's been central throughout our whole playthrough. Mind you, before this she left. For no reason, she just left. So what was her plan? The master plan at the end. Hide a baby in a snowstorm to prove a point. To prove a point. Even after making that Jane video, man, to this day it feels like she sped up a breakdown because the writers needed someone to fight Kenny. You know, as I'm talking about the writers, I think that's a topic for another video. We all know the whole point was for us to have a hard choice to make, and based on your choices we get to see who you are as a character and your morals and all that stuff. But why would it be a question of who to shoot? Kenny. Man, we know Kenny. Kenny reacts exactly how Kenny reacts. We've known this man for 2 whole seasons. You think he'll see a baby missing and stay calm? Kenny, the man who needs one minor inconvenience to make himself into the subplot? This is the average Tuesday for him. But that doesn't mean he's wrong. Here's the real issue. The game attempts to frame this as a profound moral dilemma, but the setup is too absurd to take seriously. It doesn't feel like a class of philosophies in the way it should have been. It was simple, almost too simple. The whole thing is lopsided. It was something at heart that was like a plausible idea to Jane, but it isn't. Jane's plan doesn't make any sense. Kenny's grief does. This is why you get the resulting finale where most players weren't even conflicted. They were just annoyed, myself included. It's tough to care about a fight when one person engineered it like a science project, and the other person is simply responding like the way they should. And what makes this even weirder, the whole meat of the video, is that the actual character who could have stood across from Kenny in a way that felt like a much harder choice, a way harder choice, was right there. Luke. Now that I'm done yapping about the foundation of the video, we can move on to the part that actually matters. The man, the myth, the legend. The man who was literally built for this finale. Luke and Kenny were perfectly written to have this natural yin-yang thing going on that the player actually understood. Bottom line, Kenny moves off of pure emotion, and he doesn't have a filter. We all know this. He doesn't have to fake anything either. Everything he does goes straight from his heart to his hands. Luke's the polar opposite. He tries to think before acting and tries to be the glue that the group needs. Early on in the game, when you reunite with Kenny for the first time, they give you this choice. Sit with Luke or sit with Kenny. As we all know, since we play as her, Clementine's dead in the center of all of that. These two matter to her. These two matter to her in ways that Jane never did. After the death of Omid and the disappearance of Krista, Kenny is the closest thing to family that Clementine has. Luke is the first adult in season 2 who treats her like a person. Sure, he was a little bit scared after seeing Clementine got bitten by a dog, but who wouldn't be? Once he saw that she was telling the truth and that she really went out of her way to stitch herself up, Luke has been locked in. He stayed locked in. My point is, both Kenny and Luke leave marks on her story. So when Luke and Kenny had their conflicts, those arguments weren't nothing. Luke is calling Kenny out. Kenny is drowning him out. Luke is staying calm. Kenny is cracking more and more. I think we can all agree it felt like a pot slowly heating up and ready to boil over. And all the writers had to do was let it simmer. I'm not no professional or anything, but I feel like this combo works so well because they shaped Clem into 2 totally different directions. Kenny pushes her to mature fast, to be loyal, to be bold, to harden in a way that can become extremely dangerous very quickly. I feel as though Luke teaches her to slow down, to think, to breathe, and to stay human even when the world is falling apart, especially when the goal is survival. If the final choice had been Kenny versus Luke, that would have been the hardest decision in the entire season by far. A dilemma like that would have had you walking around your room pacing with your controller on the floor, not knowing what to do. It would feel like the fate of the universe is on the line. Y'all know I'm all for symbolism and parallels, so let me put it into perspective one more time. That choice would feel like choosing between the man who held Clem's world together when it was breaking and the man who represented the kind of survivor she could grow into. That's a real choice, a real finale, and the craziest part, Telltale already had everything they needed. There's no need to do unnecessary things just to prove a point. That's what blows my mind the most about this season, man. Like, Luke was right there. He was right there. Just Kenny, just Luke, and Clementine in the middle, trying to figure out who she wants to become. So this is the first time I've ever done something like this, but I'd actually like to address a comment someone left on a previous video. This is a very common argument among the Walking Dead fans, especially when it comes to the possibility of Luke and Kenny being the central conflict, you know, to wrap up season 2. The comment says, I feel like they wrote Luke as too reasonable to start a major conflict with Kenny though. They either would have had to make Luke a worse person or make Kenny even more unhinged. Alright, so let's break this down. And don't worry, xenomorphosized? That's a tough name. You're not in trouble at all. I actually really like this comment. Luke has pretty much always been the calm one, whereas Kenny sometimes I'm not gonna lie, I can't even say sometimes. This dude Kenny is a fucking crash out. He is very irrational, I can't even lie. However, would the writers at the time have needed to make Luke evil or make Kenny have another meltdown to make it work? To me, this doesn't align with the fundamental groundwork that Telltale has already laid down for this conflict to be possible. In some ways, it could even jeopardize what the writers already set up. The problem isn't really that the writers didn't set it up. It's more so the fact that they set it up and did not follow through with what had been a perfect plan. Does that make sense? As I said before, the ending between Jane and Kenny was all a waste of character. Not only on Jane's part, but also Luke's. Cutting him out of the story and writing him out was a terrible approach to storytelling. And again, I'm not a pro, okay? Don't come attacking me, oh, you're not an author or not. Listen, I can appreciate a good story, that's all I'm saying. You don't need to be a chef to taste good food. Luke didn't have to turn into a worse person. He didn't have to take his personality and throw it out the window for the sake of conflict. The ingredients were already there. Season 2 gives him plenty of reasons to reach his breaking point. He's a good guy in the apocalypse, trying to survive with a ticking time bomb and a child and whatever the hell Jane is or was. The ticking time bomb refers to Kenny, by the way. Luke is obviously not some flawless, unshakable peacemaker. He's just a reasonable, chill guy in a far less ideal situation. Simply put, if they reached a moment where AJ or Clementine weren't safe, or if they reached a moment where Kenny made one more dangerous call that could have gotten somebody killed, Luke stepping in wouldn't be an out-of-character writing blurb. It'll be something that was built up and then executed, as it should have been. It would have finished his arc, but instead they give him a Titanic death? Are we serious? I'm sorry guys, I'm salty. I love Luke. He was a great character. I just feel like they threw him away. As for Kenny, he did not need to be any more unhinged. He was already grieving and stressed. He was protective to a very dangerous degree, but he was protective. And he was also a man that was holding himself together with tape and loose bolts. That alone is enough to secure conflict without exaggerating anything. All in all, my point is, a Kenny versus Luke finale doesn't require either of them to become different. It would have allowed all the pressure they laid out to be utilized, which it wasn't. The cabin where you're forced to pick between Kenny or Luke. In episode 3, Kenny is so vocal about his belief that Luke had abandoned them to save himself. The escape plan, Kenny wants to go in guns blazing, while Luke prefers something more cautious. Kenny wants to find Wellington, but Luke, he sees it as reckless. The obsession with AJ, Kenny sees this as a second chance, but Luke sees it as a duty to help his deceased friend. Luke constantly reminds the group that Kenny is losing it and he's becoming too dangerous for the group to handle. Kenny, in turn, mocks Luke for his perceived softness and inability to make hard choices that are required for survival. You get the point. The clash of their philosophies would have made the whole of season 2 way more captivating. And I know, I did my research, okay? I know that this ending was intended. Luke versus Kenny was supposed to happen allegedly. And apparently the developers themselves felt that Kenny would be too reasonable to do this, and that the choice would be just too hard for the player. But I already explained in the previous parts that nobody has to change, but in order to tie it all in, here's how this metamorphosis could have realistically gone down, using the grounds that Telltale already laid down. Like I said, I'm not an author. I just, what else can we do, okay? I have to make a scenario up based on what we were given. So this takes place after defeating the Russians. The group is freezing, they're exhausted, they're running out of food, and Rebecca is gone. AJ needs formula and he needs shelter, but guess what? They have neither. He's a newborn in a snowstorm with no food, and everyone knows how quickly that can turn bad. Everyone in the group is scared of what the future holds for them, especially what the future holds for AJ. However, the logic in my brain tells me that Kenny feels this the most. Every time he looks at AJ, he sees Duck. He sees his failures. He sees everything he's lost, and he sees what he could lose. So in his mind, stopping for even a second feels like a death wish. It feels like he's giving up. He wants to move, and he wants to move now. He needs to push forward no matter what. And then you have Luke, a man who isn't trying to challenge Kenny just for the sake of conflict. He sees the situation. The weather is only getting worse, and they're walking endlessly with a newborn baby into mystery land. They need to find shelter and rest. The group can regroup and come up with a different plan, something that doesn't involve just walking until something appears. To Kenny, that looks like hesitation, but to Luke, it seems like basic survival. This is where friction finally breaks the surface, and he starts interpreting every suggestion that Luke gives as weakness. Every time Luke suggests that they should slow down, it gets under his skin. And Luke, being a regular human being, is reaching his limit too. After trying to be the peacekeeper all season, Luke is finally fed up. He's watching Kenny make increasingly reckless calls. The kind of choices that he will be making as the leader will get people killed. And as anyone wouldn't, Luke doesn't want to die. Clementine is stuck in the middle. Luke is asking her to think. Kenny is asking her to trust. Then the writers just have to build the moment. They're out on ice because Arvo told them there's food in the house across the lake. That's the only reason the group even considers crossing. They don't have time to circle around. It's a move out of desperation. This is where things could have started to crack open. No pun intended. Luke sees the ice and immediately hates the plan. He knows it's risky. He knows someone's gonna fall through if they push their luck. Kenny's focused on getting across because standing still feels even more dangerous. Luke calls out the risk. Kenny fires back because he's tired of feeling challenged. Luke tries to keep the group steady. He tries to stay calm. Kenny thinks the hesitation is going to get people killed. Neither of them are wrong. They just reach the point where their differences stop being useful and they start turning into a problem. Clem gets stuck in the middle of it. These are two people she's relied on the most this season, and they can't keep moving together without something breaking. She knows it, and they know it too, even if they don't want to say it out loud. The finale seeds should have been planted right here on the ice, in the moment where survival and emotion contradict. From there, all you have to do is swap Jane and Luke. Later, when Clem, Kenny, and Luke, who would have been Jane in this scenario, end up trapped in that shop or whatever during the blizzard, the entire conflict from the lake would have naturally carried over. As always, Kenny wants to keep moving. Luke doesn't. After everything that's happened, losing Jane potentially, losing somebody else on the lake, Bonnie, Mike, and Arvo having to die, going on and on, whatever. They're stuck in a tiny space during the worst storm of the season, and the same clash that started out on the ice would finally circle back. Now again, I know Luke is very reasonable. All that needs to happen is that Kenny needs to be the aggressor. Kenny needs to tweak out, absolutely crash out. We know that Luke is rational, but he's also not a pushover. Kenny could easily tweak out and blame Luke for everything. The situation they're in, it's Luke's fault, etc, etc. It would simply be following the story's own momentum and landing exactly where the season has been pointing since day one. That would have been season 2. Now let's flip this debate on its head. If Luke really made it through the lake, if the last scene was Clementine standing between Kenny and Luke, who would you have picked? In a world where Kenny and Luke blew up just like it should have. I'm actually curious, Drop down in the comments what you think. Don't just tell me a name. Send a breakdown as to why. There won't be any hate in my comments based on your choices. And make sure to share the exact thought process that led you to choose what you did. Personally, I would pick Kenny. And yes, it's because I'm a Kenny Glazer, whatever. So yeah, it was fun writing this script and thinking to myself, but it was also kind of difficult because I can't even lie, it is a very good argument to make that Luke is just too reasonable as a person. Anyways, let me know what y'all think. It's been your boy Sunny, but of course y'all can call me Terxsu, and as always, I'll catch y'all in the next one. Peace out.